Hey everyone, welcome to Myth Informed. We were probably live before that, Mike. It's okay. Make sure you hit the audio, Mike. Mike, make sure you hit the audio one. Welcome everyone to Myth Informed special Sunday edition. We're kind of fly by seat of your pants productions today. Mike's gonna come up here and join me, so we have nobody on the board. If the audio sucks, I'm sorry. We'll fix it in post. So we do have some announcements coming up. Sorry we haven't done a show in a while. We are working on something big right now. We will have some announcements soon. Can't talk about it yet, but it's very, very exciting. I'm very excited about this one. The Minds IRL in Philly was awesome. I think this one's going to be even bigger with the crazy climate we're in. So really, really excited about that. We'll have some news shortly. Mike, how you doing?
Doing great.
Thanks for joining us today, Mike.
My pleasure.
So today we have a very, very, very special guest, Rose of Dawn. She's a trans YouTube creator who has just kind of blown up lately. Has been doing amazing work. We are huge fans, and we're extremely excited to have her on today. Rose, how you doing?
I'm really good. Been very, very busy over the last couple of months since all of this kind of took off. But no,
Yeah.
thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. And Brian was really upset he couldn't be here. He's just an actual uber nerd fan of your channel.
Aww.
And yeah, this is how it works in our organization. So we all have our different skills. Brian's skill is talent and finding people, and he's really good at finding creators or journalists or whatever, people that are kind of talking in the realm of intersectionality and social politics and identity politics, and he's really good at finding people, and he's been listening to you for a while. He was like, oh, I don't even know if we can get her on the show, so we're really, really excited that you're here.
So it makes me feel like I'm this like huge deal or something.
Yeah. And lately you've been blowing up. So take us through, for those that aren't familiar, take us through kind of how you got into what you're doing now. Like what were some of your inspirations? Why'd you start doing this?
So I wanted to do my channel for quite a long time. You know, I've been watching people like Blair White, Sargon of Akkad, Sean Head, all of these kinds of what you would call as the skeptic community, so to speak. But I was always quite cautious about putting my voice out there because, especially as a trans woman and as someone who has had friends within these trans spaces, I know that actually putting opinions out there that go against the flow can be social suicide. But around like the end of 2017, I kind of started to get to a point where I thought, I don't care about these people anymore. I don't really, I don't want to placate them. And this kind of came to a head when someone who is a friend on Facebook posted about respecting all genders, and this was a big virtue signal to her trans friends. It's just make sure, because if you're trans, make sure I respect you and I respect all genders. And I kind of decided to test this a little bit. It was like, if you respect all genders, what about trigender? What about moon gender? What about all of these magical genders? Like, are you saying that you respect them as well? And I was kind of expecting a bit of a pushback and saying, no, of course, that's stupid. I just mean like trans men and trans women. But instead, I got a response by saying, well, no, these are perfectly valid genders and they deserve to be respected. And I'm like, oh, one of these is identifying as the moon, and that's something to be respected at the same level as me. And I sort of asked, like, what do the transitions for these look like? What kind of like therapy do you have to get if you're transitioning as to free genders, or how do you identify as the moon? The responses I got was just, it's all valid. It's all valid. You're being quite transphobic now. Like, you need to kind of dial it back a little bit. And that really annoyed me because we've now got these clowns that have thoroughly taken over a narrative and representing people like me taking things that should be a parody and instead saying this is what the reality is. Like you hear about the attack helicopter memes, and recently with Piers Morgan saying he identifies as a penguin.
Yeah.
And we keep being told, well, they're really transphobic. But a couple of months ago, someone I knew came out as the planet Jupiter and had a lot of people give her hugs in solidarity just for doing that.
Wow.
So the community is going, and this has been taken over by these rabid collectivist ideologues, and they are. Eventually, I got very fed up of being told what to do, what to say, what to think by these people, and so after meeting Sargon in real life back when the liberalist movement kind of started, as it were. Because I was a part of Liberalist UK for a while.
Oh, cool.
That basically went as a bit of a springboard into me starting a channel. Now, I was only going to talk about trans stuff my first couple of videos and then branch on to more general politics. That was always the plan. But I wanted to talk about trans issues in the way that as kind of a way of talking about intersectionality and identity politics, and that the way that the modern trans movement is coming across is something which is very representative for the toxicity that is going on, where you have these intersectional ideologues basically grabbing the talking stick and saying that I'm the most oppressed, you all have to listen to me. If you don't like what I say, then you're an alt-right neo-Nazi bigot. And like I started to do these videos and then they kind of took off-ish a little bit. Like I would say, because I would be regularly getting between 500 and 1,000 views. And so people were enjoying what it was that I was saying. And after a while, I thought, well, a lot of these topics, there isn't really anyone in my position speaking about it. Like, if you look at some of the lunacy that's come out of the trans community, you might say, hear someone like Sargon talking about it. Or a whole host of other, I don't really want to say skeptic community, because I think that the skeptic community as it isn't so much a thing anymore than it was. Yeah. But those kinds of YouTubers were generally the ones commenting on it. And so I wanted to be a trans YouTuber who kind of commented on these these quite relevant stories that were going on and putting my spin on what was happening, in addition to maybe educating some people on my perspectives. I don't claim to speak on behalf of all trans people. I can't. I just speak on my own experience. And this seems to have been quite popular with some people. And now, especially after the videos that I've done on Jessica Yaniv, who I'm sure everyone listening has probably heard of Yaniv. If you haven't,
well, just a quick summary. So Jessica Yaniv was a Canadian trans woman who got into some really weird situations, like with children, and she was making some really bizarre, almost kind of like pedophilic
messaging. Has been caught messaging underage girls, has been sending sexually explicit messages to 17-year-olds, has been messaging women about whether Yaniv should take a 10-year-old girl into a cubicle and show them how to insert a tampon.
Bizarre.
Has been taking a number of aestheticians to court for refusing to wax their genitals. Has also started legal proceedings against somebody else, taking them to a Canadian Human Rights Tribunal for misgendering. Yaniv was also able to get Megan Murphy removed from Twitter. Lindsay Shepherd was also removed as well. And a lot of these antics kind of went on in the background. It was only when the Human Rights Committee, Human Rights Tribunal, decided to remove Yaniv's anonymity that people were able to properly speak out about this. I did a video on Yaniv months before all this blew up, and to kind of get around everything, because at this time Yaniv would be like, if you did any videos on Jonathan Yaniv, it would just be taken down instantly.
Yeah.
So I had to refer to Yaniv as JY in my video.
Yeah.
And so it's only once that like gag was lifted that people were finally able to talk about Yaniv without there being a lot of like, I don't know what the correct word is, but there isn't much backlash, as it were. Like, you're not taking as much of a risk anymore.
Not as protected as a
yeah. Like, apologies, I haven't slept a lot.
Oh no, it's totally fine. Yeah.
If my mind occasionally blanks, I do apologize.
No worries, no worries.
But it's interesting watching Yaniv with this, because Yaniv is someone who loves attention.
Yeah.
And is getting a lot of attention for the wrong things.
Yeah.
But it's like, if you look at Yaniv's profile, it says there are, like a talked about internet personality, which is technically true.
Yeah.
But people are talking about Yaniv because Yaniv is a clear danger to children.
Yeah.
Like, we're talking about someone who thinks this infamy is a good thing.
Yeah.
Well, Yaniv's not a troll.
Yeah.
Yaniv is like.
But I also think but she I don't even know. I'm just gonna say Jessica.
I use they because
they.
He would get you videos removed.
Sure.
But I've looked into Yaniv enough that I don't believe Yaniv is actually a trans woman. I think that Yaniv is using this purposely as a shield.
Yeah.
Because they know that it gives them a level of protection, which it has.
Right.
There have been people within the trans community who have defended Yaniv to an extent, even if they acknowledge that what they're doing is toxic, by at least saying, you can't refer to Yaniv as a man. You have to refer to her as a woman.
Yeah.
Yaniv does everything for a self-serving gain, and it has always wanted infamy and fame. And Yaniv wouldn't be known if they were a cis-het white male.
Yeah.
Like, no one will be talking about him. It's the fact that Yaniv is a trans woman. Yeah. So I think that this is a purposeful play on Yaniv's part.
Yeah, and I would say because it is highly debated. I mean, it is highly debated.
If you want to refer to Yaniv as she, then that's perfectly fine. I won't tell you not to. I'm just talking. This is my perspective on it.
Yeah, but it's a highly debated topic with her because people are thinking she's doing it as a stunt, and the stunt that kind of shot her into the media's attention was whether or not she went into a spa to get a waxing, right? And
yes,
because
there was 15 or 18 in total. 3 of them would agree to do the service of waxing balls.
Right.
15 of them refused. So the 15 ones are being taken to the Human Rights Tribunal.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate to put these companies in the situation because obviously they're specified on female genitalia.
Yes.
Trans women.
A lot of them are. A lot of it, I do believe, is racial based. Yaniv has a dislike for like Asians, in particular Sikhs, and a lot of these are a lot of people that Yaniv is targeting are women who I believe that they are immigrants to Canada. English isn't, for a lot of them at least, English isn't their first language. Mm-hmm. And like, they are basically, they're just kind of set up. They've come over to Canada. They want to set up their own little, beauty place. Mm-hmm. And then Yaniv is, for one of them in particular, Yaniv was the very first person to approach her. Mm-hmm. And then she ends up in this nightmare. And so I do think that there is a level of like Yaniv purposely targeting like ethnic minorities.
Yeah. It's sad.
Just adds another level of loveliness to this person.
It's unbelievable. And the thing is, I think the bigger problem with that whole situation, I know Blair was kind of a warrior and a champion, and she kind of went at her hardcore and started showcasing some of this stuff. But the trans community, we support the trans community. We have friends that are trans, men and women. We've hosted panels on the trans topic of MythCon 5. We had a whole range of different people on that from that perspective. But in the case of what Jessica's doing, I think hurts the trans community because she's giving a terrible stereotype and setting a terrible example for the actual bigots. There are actual bigots out there that don't like trans people, or whatever there's assholes. There's assholes in the world, and they'll take the Jessica situation and then use that as kind of like highlighting the rest of the community, which is absolutely ridiculous in my opinion.
Yeah.
So.
But then Yaniv is not the only one who's giving a bad name to trans people. Yaniv is almost like a cartoon in terms of how bad they are. But you have a look at the other big name trans activists, the people who the media turn to, the ones who get to appear on daytime TV, who get the columns, who get the appearances. And a lot of these are very troubling individuals. Like an example being Rachel McKinnon, who yesterday won a gold medal in women's cycling. She transitioned in her late 20s, I believe. She still had a lot of muscle mass built up from when she was living as a man, and is someone who is sometimes held up as like, oh, this is an great example of like a trans role model, when she's doing these competitions beating biological women, which is incredibly unfair, because McKinnon is clearly at an advantage. But then she's talked about burning people for disagreeing with her, throwing bricks at them.
Wow.
A couple of weeks ago, a radical feminist by the name of Magdalene Burns sadly passed away due to brain cancer, and she was really quite young when she died. And when McKinnon found out, she responded to this news by posting a gif of a skeleton dancing on a grave.
Jesus.
And a lot of her trans supporters responded to that gif by little bottles of champagne and being like, this is really, really funny. Like, she celebrated a young woman dying of brain cancer. Like, whether she agreed with Magdalene Burns or not is almost beside the point.
Yeah.
It's lacking human decency. And then you have people like Monroe Bergdorf, who is just a outrage chaser. You have Paris Lees, who is incredibly elitist. I don't know so much about what the scene is really like in America, so to speak. But at least in the UK, we have a lot of them are quite on the left to the far left. They will regularly push like socialism, collectivism, as that is what trans people believe. It's what trans people want. And then they will take great lengths to leave those of us who are properly liberal, like classically liberal, those of us who are conservative, like those of us who are libertarian, those of us who have any idea that goes beyond what the current progressive leftist wants us to believe. They want to control us. But these are the ones that are being almost like handpicked by the media to represent us. And one of the things that I would really want to do is to at least be someone in the UK to be able to challenge that and to say that, no, we aren't all cut from the same cloth here. We are individuals. We have our own beliefs, and like my political beliefs might be inspired a bit by my transition, but my transition was mostly my own self-reliance.
Yeah.
So like I'm quite for individual responsibility.
Yeah. Well, do you think that's why? And I'm sorry, Mike, you can jump in anytime. Do you think that's why voices such as yours and Blair's are powerful? Now, this is interesting. I'm friends with someone in the Hollywood community, trans woman. I won't name names. And it's funny because there is this clique where actually people like frown at Blair, and they actually say, "Oh, she's that one," because she's conservative. It's a really, really strange situation. Like if you're conservative and you're a trans woman, you're hated for whatever reason. Do you think that's why your voice and Blair's voice, and people that actually are classically liberal or centrist or even center right or whatever conservative, do you think that's why more you guys are blowing up more rapidly? Do you think there's just not enough of those voices?
I think that you might have a point there. So all too often when you listen to trans people the ones that are being put forward, as I mentioned, it's all from the same kind of political ideology.
Yeah.
So when you get people like myself, like Blair, like there are others like us, but there's not many who are as prominent as they deserve to be.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't say that just for the trans community, but for LGBT people in general. I do think there needs to be more of us put in the spotlight. And I think it is the kind of thing that people do want to hear. They're sick of being told by trans people that that they are bigots for believing what they want, but believing just what they do. That they are irredeemable cis trash, or all host of other slurs that they will throw out and just smear people constantly. Like, that's not the way in which you win support. Like, if I want to be accepted as a trans woman, I'm not going to get that acceptance by screaming and swearing and shouting and banging on windows and commanding people that they have to bend the knee. The way that I'm going to do it is simply by being myself as much as I can. Like, I've done my transition to look the way that I do, to sound the way that I do. I would like for people to see me as a woman and refer to me in that way, but I cannot tell them that they have to do it.
Right.
And it's the same thing with Blair. Blair's the same way. And it's not just us. So when you have people from this group, which is becoming more and more authoritarian, telling you, no, you're not a bigot if you think that too many children are transitioning. You're not a bigot if you don't want to sleep with a trans person, which, these are the kinds of messages that Blair and myself put out there. I think that resonates with people because we're at least becoming more approachable. We're telling people that it's fine to question things.
I mean, something that I noticed in your story, something that stuck out to me was how it sounds so much like the Catholic Church, so much like a religion. This new left religion, and if you're not part of the religion, you're a heretic.
Yeah,
and you can't
that's
speak
the
out
way in
against
which the queer
religion
community
because,
works.
You guys are independent thinkers like Galileo and Copernicus, and you're speaking out against the established norms. And that's the thing. Gender is based in cultural norms, cultural appropriation. And
well, and it's funny,
so
like
fluid.
I grew up, and this is one of the things I wanted to get your take on. So I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and in the 80s and 90s, there truly was an bigotry toward LGBT community. I mean, when AIDS was happening, I mean, everyone, it was like, that's a gay man's disease, and like there was this huge, like there were huge like just amounts of people that really hated the gay community, and over time it's gotten better, and the way it's gotten better is by knowing someone that's gay, or like Will and Grace, I always argue, is like a huge thing for a lot of the I'll call them normies, and I think today, there's a much wider acceptance in the West. If we're talking about like Africa, if we're talking about like areas like that, that's completely different. I'm talking about the U.S. and the U.K. There's it's not only is it accepted, it's actually celebrated, which is great, and which I'm a supporter of. But I agree with you that now there's this weird narrative that says if you don't think like this, then you're a bigot. If you don't think like this, if you don't believe this, and the interesting thing is those normies, it's tough for them. Like we deal with these topics all the time. We understand when you're called a Nazi online, it doesn't mean what it actually is supposed to mean, or white supremacist. It's those meanings are changing. But those that aren't in this world, the majority of people, the normies, I call them, it's hard for them to navigate this type of conversation, And I think what you're saying is you are offering like a more relatable way for people that don't understand the conversation to actually be a part of it and not shaming them. And I think that's super, super important, because you can only shame people so much before they start to rebel.
Yeah, and it's very different to a lot of the previous movements, like the gay rights movement, for example. There was always a militant side of it, particularly in the 1970s, but it wasn't the militant side that really won the hearts and
No.
minds. But with the advent of the internet, that militant side never really went away, and it's had more of a reach to the young activist, as it were. And so a lot of these people now found themselves radicalized, and like the queer activist is someone who it does find its way from Marxism ultimately. A lot of this is from collectivism, but the way in which they look at it is based on societal acceptance of various things. Like they promote degeneracy, and by that I mean, for example, like the idea of sexual promiscuity. I'm not saying that being into having sex with whoever you want or whatever is a bad thing, but that's the way in which they phrase it. And these are quite hardline people. And when you've now got the trans, it's almost like it's the trans time to shine. These are the ones who have now sprung up and control that conversation in a way it never happened for any other movement. I mean,
that's a good point.
It's quite frustrating because it is a full-on takeover by the hard left. And they take over, and what insults me more than anything is that they just take over an identity that has nothing to do with them. But they then will say, well, if you don't vote Labour, if you don't vote Lib Dem, if you don't vote the way that we want, so you clearly hate yourself. Like, I've been called a self-hating trans woman so many times.
Yeah.
That for some reason, I do the videos that I do. I talk about the subjects that I do, and I disagree with the people that I do because I'm so unhappy.
Yeah.
And I find that insulting,
Yeah.
but laughable as well. Like, I am much happier now questioning these people than I was when I had to toe the line. Like, I feel liberated. I feel like I can be who I am.
Yeah.
That for me isn't being miserable. That for me is living. That's what I would really encourage more and more people to do, because until more of us stand up and make a statement, this hardline far left group is going to continue to grow and will continue to corrupt other people's voices.
Yeah.
But it needs people to stand up. It needs people to like call it out.
Yeah.
It's actually kind of the irony is kind of hilarious. A group that talks about individuality, be yourself, come out, be yourself. Oh no, you can't be yourself.
Yeah.
Really?
There's
Yeah.
there's a certain version that they don't accept. Right?
So like it's interesting because people will sometimes claim that the trans rights movement, the queer rights movement, is very individualist, and on the surface it certainly seems that way, with the idea of you can identify however way you want, you can sleep with whoever you want, all of this stuff. And it's like, yeah, that's great. I think a lot of people, especially myself as an individualist, I can understand that. But when you go deeper, what they're saying isn't just you can be whoever you want, because they want to then say, well, you can't believe this. You can't identify in this way. No. You can't say this thing. You can't do that thing. But what's more is they want to control the way that other people see you. Yeah. Like, it's not enough for someone to say, I'm now a woman. What they want to do instead is, rather than that person making the effort that they need to, so society or that other people see them as a woman, they just want to command everyone to see this person as a woman. Yeah. This is how you end up with people like Jonathan Yaniv, like Danielle Moscato, being a great example. Someone who is like basically a bearded, balding bloke from New York or something. I think he's like an atheist campaigner. Just no effort at all. Like, has occasionally put on a do-rag on his head. But it's just like, I'm a woman. This is a woman's body. Suck my woman's dick. It's like that kind of thing. That's that. But that's the thing which they push. It's rather than this person says they are a woman, so what steps are they going to take to do that? Instead, everybody else has to make those steps for them. They can sit around, grow a beard. That doesn't matter. It's everybody else has to do the work. Society has to work for this person, and that I don't think is very individualist. No, because individualism isn't just saying, oh, I want to do this thing. It's taking responsibility for doing that thing. But there's no responsibility for these people. Like, they don't care about their transition in a way that I certainly did.
Yeah.
Like, I wouldn't be able to leave the house with a beard.
Right.
Like, that would be awful.
Right.
But these people instead, it's like, oh, well, society needs to change their idea.
Yeah.
You need to look at this beard and think that is a woman's beard.
Yeah.
Like, no one is that. Like, no one is going to really sit back and honestly think, yeah, that's right. They only will agree with it in public because they're scared of any kind of backlash.
That's it right there. And that's what I'm talking about with the normies. It's like it's hard for them to challenge. They can have internal thoughts and say, okay, something's not right here. But yes, you're absolutely right. In public, amongst their community, amongst whatever social network they have, it's hard for them to even formulate a thought and then also a comment because they don't want to be seen as a bigot, and it's very tough. And so I had a question for you. This one, Brian talks about this one a lot, and again, I still have some of that internal cognitive dissonance that it's like I'm not a trans woman or a trans man, so it's hard for me to talk about these issues because you feel guilty in a way. It's like saying, "Oh, I'm not black. I'm Mexican, but I'm not black, so I can't talk about black people." So one of the things he brings up. And it's interesting to me because I've heard different theories on this, and I see all of these things from different lenses. I try to, at least. But Brian brings up the kids thing. Now, growing up when I was a kid in the '90s, MC Hammer was big. We would wear baggy pants. We would do like too legit to quit and hand signals and handshakes and stuff. And we did, we tried to do things to fit in or to even be popular. Like you always had the popular kids, you always had the unpopular kids. But there were certain things you could do to improve your social score and improve your popularity. And one of Brian's arguments is that now becoming trans has become so in vogue that it actually shoots kids' popularity up to the point where, like it's celebrated if you come out as trans. It's like, oh my God, this kid is so brave. They've come out as trans. The parents are giving them praise. They're getting the national spotlight. And his theory is that potentially the school within the schoolyard they could be moving up in popularity too. So I'm like on the fence with this. It's a hard one. It's like, do you think kids coming out as trans? I just want to get your take on it. Do you think there is like a in vogue, this is the popular thing to do these days element to this?
Potentially.
Yeah.
I wouldn't rest it so much on that. What instead... Sorry, the bigger issue really is the amount of people who have some sort of say anxieties or whatever, and because of these multi-gender, everyone can be trans world, they're just being told, well, actually you're trans. And then they will in turn come out as a trans person.
Yeah.
And it feeds on that. It just feeds on those negative emotions. Now, I think there is kind of a bit of a trend of young people coming out as being trans, especially because a lot of these will be teenage girls who will just look very butch. Like that for the majority, that's the extent. It isn't so much trans men and trans women. It will be butch teenage girls saying that they are non-binary. That is where the real trend in this is. And it's, again, a lot of that I think is nonsense. I think when it comes to non-binary stuff, that it's a lot harder to take in than say like being a trans man or a trans woman. But the amount of times that this is happening, especially over such a short period of time, and when we're already hearing reports of some of these people regretting transitioning, because this is going to blow up in a couple of years. Instead, what it does is it means that young people who have gender dysphoria aren't taken as seriously anymore, because they're just going to be told, well, you're just clearly a transer. You're doing this because it's the cool thing to do. And a lot of people do jump to that thought straight away if they hear of like a 14 or a 15-year-old transsexual. And, I've been that age before, and I would have loved to have transitioned at that age. But you get so many people who are like pushing this at young people that it makes it very dangerous. And it does come across as a trend. And I don't blame people for thinking it must be the cool thing, alongside Fortnite and fidget spinners. You've got to have your own special gender. I get that. I really do. Especially when you come down to having your own pronouns and your own genders, of which there are hundreds and thousands, and each one is better than the last. Like, it kind of becomes a bit like Pokemon, where you've got to collect your own special, unique, shiny gender.
Yeah. Because at the end of the day, a lot of people just want to be unique.
Yeah. And it does. And it adds and the thing is, there will be nothing actually unique about them at all. The difference will be you refer to me as Shum, and my gender is Kale gender. Which for those of you who don't know, I think I pronounced it wrong, or it might be Sale gender, which is your gender is like a celestial body.
Oh,
like planets, moons, stars, meteors.
Wow.
So if you that is effectively moon gender. That is the scientific term for moon gender. But it is a real gender because of course it is. Like who would disagree with identifying as the moon? Only a transphobe.
Something that I just thought of, I remember the North Carolina issue with the bathrooms.
Yes.
And that if people like Yaniv paint this, like people who are activists and people who are supporters of trans rights like yourself are painting it in individuality, but people like Yaniv make it easy for the case to be made that anyone can be any gender and go into any bathroom. It's like, no, that should be ridiculous. On its face, that should be ridiculous. But then you have cases like Yaniv, and it just destroys that argument, and it does. It makes it ridiculous.
Yeah, like the Yaniv has really taken the argument that the trans community has been pushing for the last couple of years and run it to one of the most extreme points. The idea of, well, nobody's going to be doing any of this to cause harm. And then Yaniv's not even the only example.
Right.
We've had in the UK, rapists deciding in prison that they want to transition and then put into a women's prison where they would then assault women.
Yeah.
And you get this stuff happening whilst the community will tell you that no, nobody's ever going to take advantage of this. Everyone should be able to identify however they want. It's the humane thing to do. My position has always been on an individual basis. Like, you can't. It's very difficult to legislate against the idea of a trans woman being able to use a specific bathroom because you're not going to ID every single person before you go into a bathroom. And as much as some people might like to say, no, we can tell every single trans woman, we can instantly tell. Your average person probably can't.
Right.
I don't pretend to be anywhere near as good looking as say Blair White, but I've been traveling around the world. I've been to the UAE, like Dubai, Abu Dhabi. These are quite strict Muslim countries. Actually being a trans woman can get you thrown in jail because they see it as a crime, a man impersonating a woman.
Yeah.
Now, so I was in these countries and, if I had been clocked, I could have been in a lot of trouble, right?
Yeah.
But I was able to use, if I asked where the bathroom was, it's always pointed to the women's bathroom. Because they have segregated queues, I was told to go into the women's queues. When on the bus, I sat in the women's section. I was told to sit in the women's section. I was treated as a woman throughout the entire time.
Yeah.
And that was based on their perception of me. And so even though they have a legislation which would effectively say someone like me shouldn't have been doing that, I can still do that because of the way that I look.
Yeah.
And so it's difficult to really do proper legislation about it. But to then make it open, when you open it up, you do end up getting it abused. And Yaniv is the poster child for abuse of this. And it's why I think a lot of these trans activists need to stop ignoring Yaniv, stop ignoring what they are doing. And rather than just doing a cat black and making it all about them, being like, no, it's, people are using Yaniv to be really transphobic to me, and it's really horrible. Just sit back and think, well, Yaniv has been able to do what they've done because of the trans committee's the trans cabal, as it were, their advocacy. It allows it. It empowers Yaniv. And in any other year, you would think that Yaniv's ball waxing cases would be laughed out of any court. But in the next couple of weeks, there could be judgment in Yanive's favor, and that is a realistic outcome for what's happening.
Yeah.
That should terrify people.
Yeah.
Scares me.
Well,
It's really scary, but it could genuinely happen. Like Yaniv, I've been looking at the court transcripts. I've even watched some videos of Yaniv in court. Yaniv is an absolute embarrassment.
Yeah.
If Yaniv wins, it's purely because somebody has an agenda to push these like trans issues and wants them to be protected as much as possible.
Yeah, Canada scares the crap out of me. I mean, as far as being
those polite people in Canada scare you.
Yeah. It scares me because it's setting a weird precedent where you have political correctness being weaponized and changing so many things that they should not have influence over. And it's funny you had mentioned the Middle East where you were. I was in the Middle East as well. I've been in Kenya, Rwanda. I've been all over the world to like really poor, desolate areas. Actually, my wife just came back from Sierra Leone and Liberia, of all places. And when you experience those cultures, this is what really frustrates me with the West. We sit on Twitter. We call people white supremacists. We call people bigots and racists, and we use all these terrible words to define one another. Yet, when you go to these countries and you see, I mean, they were at one of the pharmacies. This is a real product in Liberia. If you go to the pharmacy, it's called virgin soap. So what they do, it's this soap that they tell the girls after you have sex, if you want to be a virgin again, you just use the soap on your private area and you're a virgin again.
Wow.
I mean, they literally have signs saying, don't beat up women. Women are your friends. And this is government signs created by the government is to advocate for not beating women and to treat them as friends. I mean, when you look at the stark difference of our society versus societies around the world. I mean, you're in the Middle East, and you see how women are completely segregated from the men, and they're constantly
so weird.
Yeah, if you don't have the hijab on, they're constantly trying to put it on you. You have to fit in. You have to blend in. You have to be anonymous. Your identity is hidden as a woman, and it's disgusting. And what I always say is these crazy activists that are here need to start focusing on the rest of the world and there's actual fights that need to happen in those countries. There's actual need for feminism and intersectionality. There is the need over there. Stop, going after people that are, for the most part, good people just because they said something. They made a joke you didn't like. Oh, so sorry. And start attacking the areas of the world that need this, where they aren't killing gay people, where they aren't killing trans people, and that's just a kind of a side. It's just something that drives me crazy anytime I get into these conversations with these people. And
it's convenient for them to ignore. They want, like, you will often hear from trans activists that we're living in an incredibly dangerous time to be a trans woman when it's never been safer, like ever.
Yeah.
It's alien to me how they can think that they realistically make these arguments. Like, I'll admit, I'm quite lucky that I can travel and I've never had any problems when I've been abroad. I've had some facial feminization surgery a couple of months ago, but even before then, like last year, I was in China, and like the reason why I kind of had people that were funny with me was because I was white.
Yeah.
Like,
they'll just stare at you like
big thing over
oh
there.
my god, they'll stare. There's no personal space. They'll get in your face if you're eating in a restaurant. They'll just stare at you and watch you like it's
the weirdest was I was outside a hotel having a vape, and there's this old guy on a bike, and he saw me and he didn't take his eyes off me at all, and he just like rode past, carried on staring, didn't blink once, and like if a car had pulled out, he'd have been killed.
Yeah.
But at least he made sure that Whitey wasn't up to no good. Wasn't bringing down the people's China. Like, it was weird. But then you also get the teenagers who want to have photos with you, and they treat you like a celebrity because you're white.
Yeah.
Like, you kind of get these weird works around the world. So before anyone says like, "Oh, you're really privileged" or something,
Yeah.
I don't care. But like I feel like I put a lot of effort to kind of get where I am though.
Yeah.
Like I did a lot of work on my voice and my body and the way that I look and the way that I act. I make sure that if I want people to see me in this way, I do the work.
Yeah.
I have to do the and what's more, if I didn't do the work, I wouldn't be happy with myself.
No.
At all. Like I want to see me in the way that I want others to see me. And so I've done what I can.
It's strange too, and you know, when you get into like the topic of race, the thing that just boggles my mind too, especially in the West. Again, we're talking in the West. In the West, the white people, for the most part, are very accepting. They're very progressive. They're liberal. They have these values that accept LGBT community and all this stuff. And it's interesting because the white race is always getting the shaft, like they're the evil ones. And yes, they're assholes. Don't get me wrong. There's the KKK and there's assholes in the white race, if that's what you want to call it. But it's funny. I grew up in Chicago. I'm Hispanic. I grew up on the north side. I also lived on the south side, which is predominantly black. And when you talk about the black community and the Hispanic community and even the Indian community, like the Asian Indian community, they are less accepting of LGBT. They're less accepting of progressive values. They're very conservative, and a lot of it comes from the religion. And so it's always weird when I watch these intersectionality conversations happen, and they're trying, like, on one hand to defend, to call white people the worst people in the world, but then at the same time you'll have black people out come on. I mean, look at some of the rap lyrics.
Yeah.
I mean, let's be real. I mean, like there is in certain communities, women are viewed in a different way, gay people are viewed in a different way, and it's getting better as a whole in the West. All of the
absolutely.
But it's just funny.
Sorry.
Yeah, no. It's just, and people call me a racist for saying that, but it's fucking true. Like, white people, for the most part, are like ahead of a lot of the other races when it comes to like progressive values. And I don't know why. You can call it privilege or whatever you can call it. I don't know what you want to call it, but it's just funny how that works. And because I've lived in those very the real like Mexican neighborhoods where it's like Jesus on the wall and Mary's everywhere and all the candles, and the gay community, it's seen as a negative, and it's changing, which is good. And I think that's why we got into the atheism stuff in the beginning, because religion like has just really confused a lot of people and told them being gay is bad and and it's not their fault in some cases, but it's changing now, which is good. But there's still work to be done.
And it's interesting when you look at London, which in the UK was generally very accepting of LGBT people, well, specifically LGB. But London, which is, we've got a virtue signaling mayor with beacon of progressivism. London, I remember from a study a couple of years ago, was actually the most homophobic place in the UK.
Oh, I did not know that.
And a lot of that is because of religious belief.
Yep.
And naturally, that got blamed on Christianity. Yep. But Christianity, actually, a lot of Christians in London were quite supportive of LGBT people. But London is quite a melting pot of all these different beliefs and cultures from around the world. And so you're going to get people who have a belief against LGBT people in this city. They are free to have that belief, but it should be acknowledged where the belief really came from, and that's a lot of it is simply down to religion.
Yep.
Like, I think a lot of people got into the whole skeptic community because of religion in the first place, or their criticism of religious belief, and more to the point, when religious belief goes from just your own personal beliefs and what you believe up to when you command the way that other people should live, when you tell them that they have to live particular ways. And whenever you look at discrimination against LGBT people around the world, more often than not, it's coming from governments that are highly religious.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah, and communities that are more religious struggle with this. Absolutely. And you can put a race on it, whatever. Christianity's had time, and Christianity is the ultimate chameleon. It will, like, it started in Rome as a response to Mithraism and all the conservative religions back then, and it allowed prostitutes in, it allowed the poor in. It was a chameleon. It goes after the biggest swath of people that can get. So of course now you're seeing it shift to being more open to women's rights, open to LGBT rights, all the things, because it constantly morphs and shifts with society. Society changes it, and they know they need to keep their numbers up. I'm telling you, before the end of our life, you're going to see the Catholic Church is going to start marrying same-sex marriages. I'm telling you. It's going to happen.
Well, they do.
They do.
Well, like, you have I remember a story of a progressive church, and I think it was Nashville, Tennessee.
Progressive church.
A progressive church.
But I'm saying a Catholic church.
Right, it is. Well, anyway, like, they're not traditionally Catholic, but
right. But I'm saying the Pope's
basically the Pope.
I'm saying the Pope's gonna come out and say,
okay,
marriages between whoever, and because they know they have to keep their numbers up, because in order to keep people coming back, you have to change with the times. And
current Pope is relatively progressive Pope for the time at the moment, but that's relative.
But yeah, so that's all I'm saying. Like, and when you go into communities that are more religious, doesn't matter what the race is, you're gonna see more issues with that, and over time that has to shift. So it's an interesting observation I've made, just kind of around the world and different communities and stuff, but.
See, that's the thing. I mean, gender is cultural, and I know that I just made a blanket statement. And
what does that mean?
Generalization, but gender is cultural. I mean, gender in America is different than gender in Saudi Arabia, is different than gender in Kenya. I mean, what it means to be a woman, how you interact with the society, what cultural norms do you follow? It's different in America, and it's different in Kenya, and it's different in South Africa, maybe, but sexuality isn't, right? If you have male genitalia versus female genitalia, that, like, you have that. You can't and in doing research for this podcast, I came across hypogonadism, and that's a real genetic disorder that you're born with sex characteristics of one or the other. But, like, if you're born with breasts and a vagina, but you're genetically actually male. And that's real. You can actually feel like you're not, you can feel like a man, but you have women's reproductive outer system. And that's the thing that gets me about the transgender and transsexual. Transsexual, I have a background in psychology, and I took anyway, I try and approach this from a biological perspective sometimes, and I mean, that's the thing with gender versus sexuality, that I think
can you explain it? I'm still confused on the gender is cultural. So
right,
explain that to me. I don't know.
That's the definition of gender.
What does that mean? I don't know enough.
Right. The social roles of the person based on their sex.
Okay.
According to the Merriam-Webster, and sex is the anatomy of the individual's reproductive system. I know we're getting a little technical here, but like, gender is fluid. And, like, okay, you want to identify, that's fine. You can identify whatever gender you want. That's totally fine. And if you feel like a man in a woman, or a woman in a man's body, which is what happened to you, and transitioning, that's 100% okay. That I don't know where I was going with this exactly.
I don't know. You kind of sound to me like a lot of the people that are very uncomfortable talking about this subject, because we don't know how to talk about it. We don't know how to talk about it, and that's the problem with all of this. Is it's where do you start? See, me personally, I don't like being collectivized. I don't like saying gender's cultural. I just like saying people are people. You are who you are, and I have no issues with that. And that's why any collectivized label I have issues with, because you always have exceptions. People look at me. I'm Mexican. I'm from Chicago. I was homeless when I was a kid. Like we had a lot of problems. So people will put me into a box that I've worked my way out of. I don't live in that life anymore. But if you leave it up to the identitarians, they're gonna the collectivists, they'll look at me as, oh, you're the poor, Mexican kid, blah blah blah, and that's not me. And
Yeah.
I don't like those labels. What do you think? What do you think, Rose?
I'm not a fan of people putting these kinds of labels on me at all.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of it is the way in which this community is very collectivized, and it tells people that they have to be a certain way, that, well, your experiences are this, this, and this, so therefore you must be thinking this, this, and this. You will therefore agree with us. You will therefore vote for the party that we tell you to vote for.
That's right.
It ignores what everyone's individual experiences are, and the experiences which ultimately shape us. We are all unique. We all have our own way of thinking, and modern day collectivist intersectional, it sounds like I'm using a lot of buzzwords, but it's a way of just explaining what these are. Intersectionality, collectivism, progressivism, all of these things, they like grouping people. And therefore, well, if we can group these people and we just get the right candidate to say the right thing, well, therefore that's the way that these people will want. They will want to support these things. And I just think that's wrong. We need to move away from this idea of you having a particular your beliefs are predetermined by who you are or what you are. I find it highly insulting, and it's something which I've always wanted to kind of fight against. As it were. It's I had something that I was about to say. My mind just literally just hit a blank.
No, it's true, and that's what attracted me to the atheist stuff initially. It's because when you're in the U.S. and traveling the world, everyone just assumes you're Christian, which is bullshit. So obviously being a part of that, it's like kind of the Rage Against the Machine. Don't label me into things, and I've always been very passionate about that. And it was actually kind of sad. We were at for our events, what we like to do is we like to bring different viewpoints together, different individuals to have discussion, because that's the only way, in my opinion, and our organization's opinion, is to move along these conversations instead of being told what to think and this is what you need to think. We need to have the discussion and say, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And then you can pick and choose and grow from that, And we are at a local event, and it's interesting. Like, the only events, politically speaking, let's just put political events that are accepted are those that toe this leftist line of, you can't say this, you can't do that, you can't, so like bringing someone like Sargon is like, oh my God, or Milo or whatever, which is ridiculous. This is not what this country was built on, but
no. But a lot of it is about control. One thing which I hated so much about the kind of the trans community, the queer community, as it were, or the left, rather, since leaving that side, since walking away, as it were, is the way they kind of condition you that anyone who disagrees with them, whether it's like a different party, a different political ideology, like, they are evil, they hate you. It's only the left that likes you. It's only the left that will accept you. It's only this group of people that are, that they are the ones who really love you. And so, you need to make sure that you don't upset the only people who love you, because if you do, well, you're on your own. Like, the right is never going to accept you. Centrists are never going to accept you. It's only the left that will be there for you. They're the ones who support you. And so if you support anyone in the center or on the right, you'll then be accused of like being a token. Or you're just doing it to appease people. You're doing it because you don't want them to send you to the camps. Like, I've been told that a couple of times. It's horrible. Like, they do condition people into thinking, and as I thought for a long time, that it's only the left that cares. It's all like I thought, well, if somebody isn't a Democrat, then they are a bad person. Like, I legitimately thought that for a number of years, and like, since being more open about who I am, I've come to realize that I was lied to for the longest time. And like, that scares me, because I believe that. Like, how many other people believe it?
Exactly. And yeah, so we were at this event, this local event, and it's very lefty, which is fine. So we showed up, just kind of see what they're talking about. And they had a representative of Black Lives Matter there from Milwaukee. And Milwaukee, Wisconsin, it's a city in Wisconsin, very segregated, one of the most segregated cities in the nation, funnily enough. It's just bizarre. And she was making an argument. This is her argument, no joke. So we were there, and you're not allowed to ask questions, of course, in these things. But she made the statement, which you can always ask questions. That's the whole point. But she made the statement that black people in Milwaukee are too poor and not intelligent enough to find the voting polls. So that's why, black people aren't voting, and we need to be working on making sure black people vote more often and doing all these things. And I was just like, that is unbelievably offensive to say about an entire race of people. They're too poor and not intelligent enough. And this explicitly was her message. And, I wanted to challenge it, but I obviously couldn't ask. You couldn't ask questions, of course. But this is the collectivism. This is how, as these things escalate, they start, looking at entire race. This is racism. This is literally judging an entire race and saying they're not smart enough to vote. That's insane to me, But they get away with it. How is that even? It's crazy,
It's because they just say the right things. It's, they're doing it to patronize people, but a lot too many within the community don't speak out against it. They seem to like this patronizing.
Yeah.
A lot. For me, I don't get it, but I feel like I'm someone who's broken away from the kind of the groupthink that it used to be. Although, having said that, I never really went along with everything which they said anyway.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people are just happy to kind of wallow around in it. So it's like, we are too poor and stupid to be able to take an ID to a voting booth.
Yeah.
Fine, whatever.
Yeah.
We don't need to think because the figureheads in the community have done the thinking for us.
Yeah. She got a standing ovation.
It's so ridiculous.
So it's
Jesus Christ.
it's just like those things where it's like that's racist, and just because it's a black woman saying it does not mean it's not racist, and so it's just So
probably the same person, the same woman would say that if Joe Biden's said about poor white kids can be just as his gaffe about the poor
stupid statement
kids, but like
he said poor kids can be just as smart as white kids,
right? And
outrageous.
I'd be willing to bet good money.
What an
that
idiot!
She hated him for saying that.
Oh, I'm sure.
And she said the exact same thing, just differently.
I'm sure.
That's the hypocrisy.
I'm sure. This one article I found, they did an interview. It's like some hip hop magazine that did an interview with. I'm forgetting her name. One of the founders of Me Too, the black lady. I forget her name. Whatever. It's one of the founders of the Me Too movement, and she had this long statement about Dave Chappelle. And before we go, I want to get your take on Dave Chappelle. But so she made this statement about Dave Chappelle, and she was lumping him in with Louis C.K. And she goes, she's saying, "Oh, Louis is terrible," because he's never apologized. He kind of did an apology, but he's not good enough for them. So. They hate him. But she makes a statement about Dave, and she goes, well, on one hand, she's like, Dave has never been accused of anything. And then it goes, whatever. He has decided to go down this road of challenging blah, 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 blah. And it's like, you can't just say he's never been accused of anything, whatever. It's like, wait a minute. Jesus Christ. Like, what a way to frame that, He's a good
he
guy.
He hasn't been accused of anything, so he hasn't been accused of anything.
Yeah, just leave it out. You don't need that little whatever, like implying, someone hasn't said anything yet. Type. It's like Jesus Christ. But the Dave Chappelle thing kind of lit the internet on fire a little bit. In the whole social culture war, if that's what you want to call it. What was your take on that? Because now. You have like certain activists, I will say, it's lefty activists coming after him because the trans woman that he referenced in his bit actually committed suicide post his special. And of course, they're all trying to like pin it on Dave, which is outrageous in my opinion. But I want to get your opinion on this.
So I actually did a video on this last week.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure a lot of people watching this probably don't know what my take on it is. What's so awful about this is there's absolutely nothing that connects Dave Chappelle to the suicide.
Yeah.
But people are using it as a stick to basically beat him down and say, that, it's because you said these things that we didn't like. Well, she was perfectly fine with it all, by the way. Like, there's absolutely nothing that she said publicly that is anything against Chappelle. Like, she seemed perfectly happy with what happened.
Yeah.
So you have her being fine, but they kind of add their own narrative to her death and then use it against someone that they don't like. You have these media publications saying she was at the center of this controversy. Very few of them actually commented on her being, even referenced, because it went against the narrative at the time. We were told that this special was really offensive and really horrible to trans people. And there was a trans woman who inspired a lot of it and enjoyed it. And they ignored her.
Yeah.
They all ignored her, except for now when it's convenient. They all of a sudden want to acknowledge her.
Yep.
But they don't acknowledge what she ever said. What they acknowledged was, she knew Dave Chappelle. And people who don't like Dave Chappelle are using somebody else's death against him. Like, we keep hearing from the trans community about how awful, the mainstream, the straights, the cis, and all these people are. We keep getting told that. But yet the community is going to use someone who died as a weapon against someone.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter whether she would have probably completely disavowed everything which is being said.
Yeah.
She would have completely disavowed it. But no, it's fine. It's fine to just to use a dead person to push an agenda nowadays. Yeah. It's fine. The community says that's okay so long as it's their agenda that is the one that is being shoved on everyone.
Yeah.
It's absolutely revolting what they've done here. And I am very surprised that there are not more people outraged by what's been said.
Yeah.
Like, I'm furious.
It's hard to what do you do to combat the outrage mob? Like our take is ignore them completely and just keep doing everything we want to do.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much like the only thing that we've figured out works, and eventually they'll move on to something else. But it's like, how do you go? Like what, and that's the issue with social media. It's like created, and Sean Lennon actually came out with a really great tweet yesterday where he was talking about how anyone can go on and make any claim about anybody without any evidence, and and it sticks, and in a lot of cases it sticks. And what do? You have no recourse, and it's just it's scary, so. But Rose, we are coming up on the hour here. We want to thank you so much for coming on. Tell us what do you got coming up? Like, what do you got? You got a video coming out today? You got another one?
Yeah, so it's actually premiering right now.
Awesome.
A video on how many LGBT national holidays there are, because a couple of days ago it was International Pronouns Day. A few days earlier it was Coming Out Day. So exactly how many of these days are there? So I'm taking a look into that. I also run a series called Trans Stupid, which will be out on Tuesday. That goes out every Tuesday, where I can take a run over the week. I also do a series called Pillars of the Community, where I look at some of the biggest names in the trans activism movement.
Yeah.
I've done videos on Jessica and Eve. I also did a video on Chris Chan. I know that Chris Chan isn't like a big name in activism, but certainly a big name online. And my next video on that will be out in the next couple of weeks, and it'll be on Monroe Bergdorf.
Awesome.
So thank you all for having me on, and if anyone's listened to this live, go check out my channel.
Yeah, it's premiering
and watch
right now.
the premiere, which is on now.
Yeah,
I need to go and say hi to everyone watching it.
yeah, do that. Rose, thank you again for joining us. Mike, go ahead and hit the button. Next week we'll have someone different. I'm sure. I'm trying to get Emily Molly.